Is this a waste land?
Wilderness, by which we should understand a place without people, is generally bursting with life of one sort or another. It's only from a very narrow human point of view that we might ever describe such places sometimes as waste land. In the industrial age, of course, another form of wasteland has emerged, namely the wholesale industrial desecration of a landscape. Greendykes Bing is a mountain of industrial waste within legal reach of Edinburgh, where for a while thousands of people earned a living, and most of them had been brought in along with the machinery from elsewhere for a short, hard life in these mines, while their bosses, of course, made millions. The mountains of waste moved in. Within a human lifetime since that ended, though, trees have grown. Life has begun to claim what we were content to see as only waste. I just saw a deer over there. We've had our wicked way with the earth. Now that we've gone, life picks up the pieces. Trees have not just taken root, but they have grown. A new sanctification of a condemned and desecrated landscape. And it's not just the first or the only time. New every morning is God's love, affirmed the people of the shattered society that produced the Book of Lamentations. Almost scandalously, the irradiated, evacuated land around Chernobyl is rich with wildlife. Now, when the Celtic saints sought out for their sanity and spiritual health a deserted place, that was never a place of barrenness, nor even in their day was it one which was totally untouched by human hand, but it was rather one which for that moment was not brutally, rigidly and immediately determined directly by human intervention. The romantic preoccupation with untouched virginity of wilderness is a bit of a red herring. Wilderness comes and goes. Wilderness can be destroyed or invited. It can be nurtured. It is a partnership. That awe-inspiring biodiversity of the green leafy wilderness, the Amazon rainforest, is beginning to be suggested was kick-started by prehistoric human agriculture. Wilderness is a landscape where even the behaviour of the rocks is not set in stone. It's where the interdependence, even of predator and prey, moves mountains, uproots trees, brings streams of life-giving water to dry places. In short, and literally, it's where nature does everything that we're taught that faith should accomplish. I think we can add to that too every breaking down of those dividing walls that claim to protect yet end up imprisoning. Ponder that and have faith, friends, that nature does everything that we're taught that faith should accomplish. At the same time, as friends, at the same time as we are cursed by the growing realization of the immense damage that human activity has and is doing to the balance of climate on which every civilization has depended, at the same time as that curse, we are blessed to live in a time when, with the authority of empirical science, the power of insects, of beavers, of wolves, and indeed the language of the trees, previously accessible only to the poet and perhaps the forester, that is gaining a hearing. And that was always the point of prayer and fasting and things that you give up for Lent, to build you up, not to break you down, not to break down your spiritual resilience, to cash in perhaps some exhaustion or cold or discomfort for a new perspective. So wilderness does not escape or ignore, but sets in robust perspective the partnership of human beings with fellow creatures. All the more when we have been tempted, and in the recent past even encouraged sadly by Christian teaching, to mistake our special place in creation for carte blanche to trample, exploit and abuse. Now, landscapes come and go from wilderness. path, and indeed we've only to look out on a snowy day to be reminded of how amazing are the transformations even from season to season. But then comes the time when the first tree grows on a slag heap like the rubbish tip where the cross of Christ was raised. Now, said George MacLeod, Christ crosses every tree. Science, never truly in conflict with faith, affirms how trees and green things give to all other creatures both food and the breath of life. Trees convey the Spirit. Jesus said, consider all the trees. Trees as a source of life and wisdom and the air we breathe. The tree like a wise person that knows when to bend rather than to break. The wood of the ark that carried life through the flood, the branch in the dove's beak that gave the news of hope beyond disaster, and the mustard bush that gives a home to the birds, which ecological value is presented by Jesus without ambiguity as a very good thing indeed. There is such green richness rooted in the stories of our faith, in which human beings are never, ever separate from the living, growing things God makes us responsible for, and on which we also depend. In Mark's Gospel we find Jesus, buffeted by the breath of God, entering without determinative power into this dynamic living environment. An environment which, in the same way that a mountain speaks to a hill walker, it commands respect on pain of death. Do I matter to the mountain? Maybe it's good for me to realise that I don't. So what location did I think of for this reflection? Well, I thought of this and more. Within the travel restrictions of this time, the Pentlands are the closest, obvious and maybe the most attractive bit of wilderness within reach. So car parks there are full, and places where not so long ago you might see someone else in the distance, it feels like the wilderness has become crowded, really due to lockdown. I look at the Pentlands and we have really shaped this landscape, not least in the felling of the native trees some 4,000 years ago without replacing them, creating in nature's hands a whole alternative set of ecosystems and environments. We always have an impact, for good and for ill, often a mixture. We shape, but we do not create or determine this world. And when alongside our baptism into the water, the breath of God blows us into a baptism into wilderness, indeed into a time of trial, that's where we have the sharpest opportunity. The version of the Lord's Prayer which I have taught to my children makes this appeal. Save us in the time of trial. In these testing crises, COVID and beyond, we should look to God, whilst remembering how God also looks to us. Not naively denying that bad things happen, not falling for Satan's jibe that faith is for the pathetically weak and vulnerable alone, but assertively asking for and being prepared to receive such help as may be offered by God, by the earth, by the trees, with their gift of oxygen, by the power that will eventually turn a slag heap into a green hill, and the snow that then adorns and blesses both. When the wind blows, the spirit of change and therefore of life, may she unsettle and repurpose the stranded assets of our investment in an already obsolete status quo, and go for it and get on with it. Take the advice of those other angels, friends, at the ascension, to stop gawping up at the sky and find our place and purpose as God's people here and now on earth. The climate emergency, which is going to be the backdrop on which the drama of all our lives is played out, overturns that sad security of our churches who, until now in my lifetime, could see no other future than decline and irrelevance. It releases us from rational despair. It insists that, like Christ in the wilderness, we both throw ourselves on the mercy of God and keep our wits about us. Amen.